Al-Amin. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, which means in the name of Allah, the beneficent, the merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. I bear witness that there is nothing worthy of worship except Allah, the one who created us all, and Allah alone. Allah has no partners, no associates. There is nothing and no one comparable to Allah, and I bear witness in the same breath that Muhammad ibn Abdullah is his last divinely sent messenger and the seal of the prophethood. Amin. Brothers and sisters, friends of Salam Media, friends of El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan, friends of Facebook, I want to welcome all of our viewers and listeners of Salam Media and beyond to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. This week's program features, well, this is a very special program for me. It's a very special program. It features a conversation with the distinguished Ansari family, a family I have had the pleasure of calling personal friends for many years now. Ustadha Zaynab Ansari is someone who has become well known within Islamic circles in the West and abroad. She is recognized for her scholarship. She is one of the bright shining stars, alhamdulillah, on the feminine side of what Islam has to offer from the West. She has served the Muslim community of Knoxville, Tennessee since 2014 as a scholar in residence, a public speaker, a facilitator of interfaith dialogue, as a youth mentor, and a full-time instructor at Tayseer Seminary. I've known Sister Zaynab and her younger sister Sumaya Ansari. I've known the two of them since they were young girls. And alhamdulillah, you know, they have both grown up and blossomed into young women with their own families, and I'm so proud of both of them. But what makes this program today even more special is that we are going to have the matriarch and the patriarch with us as well. Sister Kafi Niambi and Brother Mansour Ansari are very dear friends. And I'm sure there are many folk who are familiar with the work of Sister Zaynab who are not aware of her personal history, of who her parents are, and you know, the interesting story that goes along with it. And given where we are today, both here in America and in the global community, the polarization, the racial polarization, the political polarization, the class polarization, we want to have a discussion today around issues that have the power to enable us to transcend those fissures of polarization. We want to talk about Islam, and we want to talk about the beneficial aspects of Islam as it relates to this issue of polarization. I was reminded in the lead up to this program of the words of El-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, a.k.a. Malcolm X, from April 26, 1964, when he sent that thought-provoking letter back from Hajj. He had just completed the Hajj, and he wanted to convey a message to his brothers and sisters back home, to those outside of his immediate ranks back home, to those who had been following his work, the controversies that swelled around him during that period of time, and were following his journeys to different parts of the world outside America. He wanted to send a message back. And one of the things that he said in this message, and I quote, he said, if white Americans could accept the religion of Islam, if they could accept the oneness of God, Almighty Allah, they too could then sincerely accept the oneness of men and cease to measure others always in terms of their difference in color. And with racism now plaguing America like an incurable cancer, all thinking Americans should be more respectful to Islam as an already proven solution to the race problem, quote unquote. With that said, we want to begin this discussion. I expect this is going to be a thought-provoking, just a very beautiful discussion, inshallah ta'ala. What happened? Wait, what happened? I want to make sure that we're still together here. Okay, yes, we're still here. All right, come on. We want to have a thought-provoking discussion today, inshallah ta'ala. Here I go again, fading out. Let us begin. Let us begin this discussion with my brother and sister Mansour and Kathy Niambi sharing some personal history. How you came to Islam, how the two of you met.
Wow.
Yeah, let's begin there, and let's begin with Sister Kathy, please.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Okay, so you can hear me?
Turn your mic
I can
up.
hear you. Just speak up a little louder, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, do I need to turn it up?
Turn it up or speak up.
Speak louder.
Okay.
Speak louder, yes.
Okay, is that better?
A little, not a whole lot, a little.
Okay. I have it turned up about as much as it can go.
Okay, just turn up your volume.
Okay, turn up my volume.
Your human volume. Just speak a little louder, inshallah.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna have to yell because I tend to have a softer voice.
Yes, you do.
Okay, so where do you want me to begin?
Begin with your journey to Islam, how you came to Islam, and how you and my handsome brother here on my left, how the two of you met.
Well, that's a long story.
That's a long story. If you can give us really an abbreviated version.
And I'm trying to think about how I can give you an abbreviated version of that. Okay, I'm going to reveal some secrets about me.
Okay.
And I was born in Detroit, right? Mm-hmm. And at the age of 17 or 18, I left Detroit and I journeyed to Syracuse, New York. And that's where I met Mansour.
Okay.
And I met him at Sigma Nu fraternity. And then it's, as we know.
I'm going to ask you a question, and be truthful with me.
Yes.
Was it love at first sight?
Not for me, no.
Not for you. Okay, we're gonna put that question to Mansour as well. But go ahead, sister.
Okay. So anyway, and that's just a history that's just too full to even start to discuss.
Okay.
But anyway, so as time went on, I was a hippie.
A real hippie? Capital H?
A real hippie. A real hippie, okay? And I started to get very much concerned about spirituality and this kind of thing and, diet. So I was always experimenting with things. But anyway, as it came to be, I actually met someone who was a new Muslim. His name was Ghanim, and he was from Harlem. And he was a student, a freshman at Syracuse University. And he was a new Muslim. And so we started talking about Islam. And I found it very interesting. I also read the autobiography of Malcolm X. I had gone to the main masjid in London when I had visited London to visit some of my friends from Syracuse University who were exchange students there. And so I followed, the autobiography of Malcolm X. I went to the masjid. I called myself covering. I called myself making wudu, salah, the whole 9 yards. And I didn't know anything that I was doing, but I tried, right? So anyway, what happened as time went on, I went to Spain, southern Spain, Malaga, the coast of southern Spain, because I thought I had found my spiritual master. And remember, I wasn't Muslim. I was in just a hodgepodge of Hinduism and then Buddhism and yoga and everything combined, right? So anyway, I met this man, but what happened was I took with me a volume of the hadith about because my friend Anim had given it to me. So I was armed with that. I didn't have Qur'an, but I was armed with that. So anyway, over my stay in Spain, I was reading this volume of hadith, and I tried to do everything that they said that the Prophet did. And so, I was like, again, I was trying to fast, I was trying to pray, and this, that, and the other. And also I was a gourmet natural foods cook, right? That's one of the things I did. And I was working for this particular family. And all this time, this family had talked about I was their sister and this, that, and the other. And so anyway, a little dispute happened about the kitchen. And anyway, the person I was working for ended up calling me her servant. And so I just kind of looked at her and I said, no, I'm only the servant of Allah. And that's when everything changed for me. All right. So I promised Allah, I got stranded in southern Spain, and I promised Allah that I would become a Muslim if he got me back home to Syria.
Wow.
So anyway, all that time that I was there, I was hearing Spanish, and I don't know any Spanish except for a couple phrases, no English. And because of my complexion, the men that I met in Coen, Spain, would chase me down the street saying, Moreno, 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 brown, brown, right? So I couldn't go out of my little hotel room except to go to American Express and to go to the Central Market to get some fruit because I was a vegetarian at that time. So anyway, I'm trying to get to the airport because I'd run out of money. And I'm just trying to get to the airport because I had enough money to get on the flight. But then the flight only came every 2 weeks. So I'm standing in the corner and I'm making dua. I didn't call it dua then, I'm just praying. And I basically said, oh Allah, if you get me back home, I'll become a Muslim. So for the first time in weeks, I heard English. And there were 2 young men, European ancestry men, standing across the street from me. So I ran over and I said, do you speak English? They said, yes. I said, where are you going? They said, to the airport. I said, can I ride in a taxi with you? And they said, yes. So anyway, got to the airport, got back on the flight, got to Europe, went around Europe a little bit, went back to America, waited for them to have Salatul Jum'ah, went there and became a Muslim.
Alhamdulillah. So that was your journey to Islam. Did you know this, Sister Zaynab? Did you know this part of your mother's history?
Alhamdulillah, yes. I'm definitely familiar with this part of my parents' history, but this is uniquely historical in that this is our first time actually sharing this with a wider audience.
With the wider audience, mashallah. May Allah Ta'ala bless it. Brother Mansour,
Yes,
your journey,
sir.
brother, your journey to Islam, and how you met this attractive sister who used to be a hippie.
That's
and made
right. Well, we were
a
both
miraculous
hippies.
transformation.
That's right. I was at Syracuse University my sophomore year. After the freshman year, they said if you want to have a good social life and you want to have dates and meet women, you have to be in the fraternity. So at the end of the freshman year, we rushed Sigma Nu, my friends and I. And Syracuse, of course, at that time was a football school, the era of Larry Zonka. And so Floyd Little had just died from multiple sclerosis. He was supposed to be the next big thing in football. And so my sophomore year, here I am, a member of the fraternity. I've got my room in the fraternity house, and I'm walking to school or to class. And something in the back of my mind said, turn around, go back to the frat house. And of course, I was a pretty good student. I never really missed classes, but somehow I just turned around and walked back to the frat house. And I went into the living room, and there she was standing there. And I looked at her, and I said, whoa. And I didn't know what she was doing there. So I went to my room. I put my books down on my desk. I said, who was that woman? And I just went back down to the living room, and for like 10 or 15 seconds, we both kind of looked at each other in total silence. And I just felt that, wow, what an amazingly attractive and unusually special woman. And I put my books down in my room. Like I said, I went to the living room. I said, who are you and what are you doing here? And she said her name. And this was a Wednesday. And I said, how long are you going to be in Syracuse? She said, well, I'm selling these magazine subscriptions door to door, trying to get money to go back to school. And I guess I'll leave on Sunday. And I just said it right there. This was a Wednesday. I said, whoever you're working with, tell them you're not going anywhere. You're going to stay here with me. And for some reason, her boss was going to come pick her up and take her back to the hotel where they were staying with the other team members. And I was just standing there next to her in the foyer of the fraternity house. And I just wanted to grab her and hug her and just be next to her. But I know I couldn't cross that line. And so when she left, I was very, very nervous and shaking, and I couldn't collect myself.
Oh my God.
And I said, I've got to see her again. I don't know what's going on. And so I got my friend to give me his car, and we went out there to her hotel on the outskirts of Syracuse. And her boss was this ex-Marine guy, real muscular, thick, kind of muscular guy, white guy. And I asked about where was the, where was her, no, not my wife, where was this lady? She used to be known as a different name before, Kafi Niambi Ansari, of course. And he knew what I had in mind. And he said, you're not going to see her. You're not going to be with her, and just get out of here. And I said to him, look, buddy, it's not a good idea to get me angry. So I went and got her, and we immediately started our relationship. And I knew I had done what W.E.B. Du Bois referred to as I crossed the color line. And of course, I had dates already that weekend with 2 or 3 different women, one for the game, one for the day after the game. And I had to call them up and say, no, hey, I'm off the market. I'm not going to be seeing anyone. And I'm with my girlfriend, and that's it. So I had to delete 2 or 3 dates. And little by little, we, got to know each other. And my family, of course, unfortunately, my father could be described as a Lebanese version of Archie Bunker. If you're familiar with the show All in the Family. You see, I had a very low draft number at that time. And I knew that if I had revealed this relationship to my father and mother, then he would kick me out of school and I'd be in Vietnam. So we both agreed to keep our relationship on the low until graduation. But my sisters and brother came up to Syracuse for some homecoming weekend. And I said, look, there's a woman who I'm going to introduce as my roommate's girlfriend. She's my girlfriend. So please, I want her to see you. I want you to see her. She's my life partner. But I don't tell Dad. And so, of course, these things weren't as planned. And my father, of course, couldn't wait to get away from the earshot of my wife-to-be and called her the N-word. And so this was the laying the groundwork of the stupidity and ignorance that pervades in our society. And, one step led to another. We moved in together. We're married soon after that. And that was 1968, the year that this country was going through what we all know. 1968 was the Democratic National Convention. It was, they killed King. They killed Bobby.
Yeah, there was
riots everywhere.
Right.
Black Panthers, Black Power movement. I was part of the hippie group that was aligned with the black students to bring about the Vietnam War moratoria.
Yes.
We were very strong. Syracuse was a stronghold of the Black Panther Party. We could literally snap our fingers and put 20 or 30,000 people on the street. to avoid, to oppose the war in Vietnam. I got picked up by the cops because I had crossed the color line, and it put me in jail for a couple of days because I crossed the railroad tracks in their eyes. And then when we were together back then, before we became Muslims, I got chased home by rednecks in the pickup trucks, and I also got chased home by the brothers in the hood. One time I was walking back to our apartment, and 25 young African-American men, I think they were high school age, I heard them say to each other, "Is that him?" And yeah, that's him. And I got attacked and kicked on the street, and I had to curl up like an armadillo. If a cop hadn't been patrolling the neighborhood, they probably would have torn me apart. So that's a little bit of our story before Islam. I've been hurt, and I've hurt people, and I've had people hurt. And I'm happy to say this to a global audience. And so a few years later, she became a Muslim a few months before me, and we both knew that Islam was the way. But I was playing my trumpet with a jazz band. We made our living by playing in the bars and nightclubs, and I wasn't ready to walk away from that. So my wife, she convinced me. She said, "How are you going to be a Muslim and be going to the bar every night around all the alcohol and the drugs and the smoking and the women? How you either be a Muslim or go down the road with?" Well, in this case, it was Stevie Wonder. I was down in New Orleans where I accepted Islam, and Stevie Wonder, I was part of the jazz scene down there, and Stevie came through town in '74 after he had put out Hotter Than July and Inner Visions, which were revolutionary albums, and actually brought the races together, I would say, because before then he was on the Tamla label, playing only to a black audience across the railroad tracks. But then when he did Talking Book, Hotter Than July and Inner Visions, he became a megastar and brought in all kinds of people. Anyway, he came through New Orleans and said he wanted 2 trumpet players for his road band, and I was supposed to be one. He wanted 1 black one and 1 white one. I'll leave it up to you to decide which one I was supposed to be. And so I was ready to go on the road with Stevie, but my wife, she was in Washington, D.C. We had split up over her conversion to Islam a little bit before me. So I decided I'm going to, go on the road with Stevie, and I'm going to fly to Washington and tell my wife, look, we had a good run, 6 years from 68 to 74. Have a good life. I'm out of here. So I flew to Washington from New Orleans, rehearsing my line to tell her, please don't write me any more letters. Don't talk about Islam anymore. Have a good life. We had a good run. Adios, amigo. But instead, when I saw her, all of a sudden, I got shivers all over my body because she looked different than the 6 years before. She was always a very provocative, attractive, gorgeous woman, But then after having seen her in 6 months, and she's wearing her hijab, and it's kind of a light coming out of her that she's submitted to Allah now, you see, and it just kind of struck something in my heart. And instead of saying the line that I paid $700 for the airline to say, goodbye, get out of my life, later, alligator. Instead, I said, I thought about it a lot. I'm ready to become a Muslim right now. And we're going to get together. It was an immediate conversion. And my daughter Zaynab has compared it to Omar bin al-Khattab as a spiritual transformation immediately in a split second. And so this is what happened, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Because of my Lebanese background, there's a lot of, even though Islam is global and has all races and tribes and nations, there's still a lot of ethnicity in Islam. Yeah. And in America, Islam is part of the Black liberation movement. Let's be real. And so I kind of stood out as one of the only non-African-American converts. And so, but I was accepted into the community by the African-American, backbone of the community, as well as the Arabs and the Asians and everything. But the Lebanese and the Arabs accepted me a little differently than the others, because after all, I'm kind of one of them. Even though I was raised as a Christian in the church, Syrian Orthodox Church in Worcester, Massachusetts. So they accepted me, took me under their wing. They didn't even consider me as an American. They considered me as an Arab. So this helped me a lot in my early days in Islam. But I could go on, but I'm sure you got more important things to listen to.
Alhamdulillah. One of the things that stands out in that narrative that you just shared, my brother, is that while it may not have been love at first sight for Cafe Nyambi. It was definitely love at first sight for you. In
That's
fact,
right. Yeah.
it was a double love at first sight. You know,
Yeah, right.
from the first moment, and then to the point where you thought you were going to be saying adios, and it hit you again and
It's a double one.
changed
Yes.
the trajectory of your life, mashallah, for the better, for the best.
That's what. Yeah, I
And
never thought of it that way, but it was a double. Yeah.
yes, and you have two beautiful, the two of you have two beautiful daughters as the products of this sacred union, alhamdulillah. Now, speaking of which, we have one of those daughters with us today, and I want to ask our sister Zaynab, given your family's personal and the are you all right, my brother? Given
Yeah, I'm going right back. He's going to
all
go
right,
across the room.
given your family's personal history, this wonderful story, the little bits and pieces of it that was just shared, coupled with, you know, the journey of sacred knowledge that you have been on for many years now. It's taken you abroad, and you know, you've accomplished a great deal academically and spiritually in this course, and you're doing a tremendous amount of work with it by the grace and mercy of Allah, both in uh, uh, Tennessee as well as in other parts of America and the globe. Given this very challenging moment that we're in right now, as a nation and as a global community, how do you see your personal history, the insights that you've been able to glean from your personal history, your journey, and how does this factor into, from your perspective, the challenges that we all face today?
Thank you so much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyid Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Thank you so much, Brother Mauri, Al-Hajj Mauri, for that very thoughtful question, and I think a very profound question. Now, before I endeavor to answer your question, inshallah ta'ala, God willing, I just have to say that again, I've never appeared on this kind of public forum with my parents, so I just want to extend my appreciation to them for sharing what is a deeply personal story with, you know, with a global audience. But one of the things that I remember, mashallah, there's a sister here in Tennessee, Sister Zulfat Sawara, that I met some years back. Sister Zulfat's originally from Nigeria, and she was the first Muslim elected to city council in Nashville. And we were talking about my family's story. And it's interesting, you know, when it's your family history, Brother Mauri, you tend to kind of take things for granted. You think, oh, well, this is how everyone's family, you know, every family has this experience type of thing. And then when I was talking to Zulfat, she said that, you know, just the configuration of your family by its very nature is so revolutionary and so inspiring, you know, to herself coming from Nigeria, she said, to other members of our Muslim community. And you know, it's not quite, I just think of this is just what Allah Ta'ala wrote for me in terms of these are my parents and this is our story. But I think that there is value in looking at our personal experiences and journeys and figuring out what we can extract from that that could possibly be a benefit, I think, for a larger audience. Remember that our ummah, Allah Ta'ala describes our ummah as ummatan wasata, an ummah that's balanced, an ummah of moderation. And you know, in this particular historical moment that we find ourselves, this is a very strange political climate. As you mentioned, Brother Mauri, we're dealing with a lot of polarization, and you know, there are these fissures that are emerging. They've been around for a while, but I think in that brief moment, euphoric moment of that we thought we were in, you know, after the election of Barack Hussein Obama in 2008, you know, there are some of us who are saying for this brief moment of euphoria, we're in a post-racial moment. And then we see what happened in the election of 2016. So these fissures have been around for a while. And for us as a Muslim community, I think that we can look at the redemptive potential of Islam and the way that it manifested in my parents' story, and consider the role of Islam in the critical healing that is needed in our country, in our communities, in our families. So I look at my parents' story because I've been asked to join a lot of different panels and talks, you know, on this topic over the last few weeks, and this panel, mashallah, is quite unique. But one of the things that I've been sharing with those other audiences is that for my parents, the karama of Bani Adam is something that they embraced as a reality. They never saw it as you know, something that was just empty rhetoric or platitudes, because I think that too often within our Muslim community, we kind of paper over these fissures, and we're sometimes reluctant to have these difficult conversations because we think, okay, I'll just quote an ayah in the Qur'an, I'll mention Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu anhu, and that's like the end of it. But what we need to understand is that, you know, if we go back to the guidance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us in the Qur'an, right, and understand this, take this beyond, you know, take this beyond, again, sort of these platitudes that we've kind of resorted to, and we look at the very real stories of the story of my family, other families, where, as my father mentioned, that being able to become part of a community where those bonds of unity and brotherhood and sisterhood are based on something that is far more transcendent than the racialized realities of a 20th century United States. To me, that's very powerful, and I believe that there are solutions, God willing, in these teachings. But what we have to figure out as a community is how to distill these teachings in a way that makes sense, in a way that's relevant for a larger community. Right? So I want to mention just one ayah in the Quran. This is verse 70 of chapter 17. And وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. So this is أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. We have conferred dignity on the children of Adam. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ وَحَمَلْنَاهُمْ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ وَرَزَقْنَاهُمْ مِنَ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَفَضَّلْنَاهُم عَلَى كَثِيرٍ مِّمَّنْ خَلَقْنَا تَفْضِيلًا. And I really love this verse, that we have conferred dignity on the children of Adam. And when my sister and I were coming up, my parents never even used the term biracial or multiracial. For them, the unity and the universality of the Muslim Ummah, it was not just some abstract principle, right? This was a reality, and this was something that they embraced in our household, and it was on the basis of this understanding that they raised me and my sister to be able to see the common and shared humanity in all of us. I mean, that's what took us from the United States all through the Middle East and other parts of the world. And, you know, to this day, when people ask me to speak to these issues, I have to tell them that for me, I was brought up in such a way to where we understood that race as a label had no biological basis whatsoever, that this was an edifice that had been set up in this country to divide people, to keep African Americans subjugated. But by entering into Islam, right, enter into Islam wholeheartedly, that it opened up just a completely new world for my parents and for the rest of our family. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve them and reward them.
Ameen. Ameen. Sister Kathy, Niambi, I often...
Can she adjust her camera so she can come up to the middle of it? There you go. There you go.
I often make note when I speak to young Muslims, especially, and non-Muslim audiences as well, but the young, that, you know, history is cyclical. Names and faces change, but the pattern of human behavior remains the same. there are many things that we're seeing today that we saw back in the turbulent 60s. What do you see? And then I also want you to respond to this question as well, Brother Mansour. What do you see as parallels between, you know, what the parallels between what was happening in the 60s and what is happening now? And what do you see as marked differences? And do you see reason for optimism in what you're seeing today, especially vis-a-vis this global pandemic that we're in, and also this pronounced attention being given to not just policing in America, but how the criminal justice system has been racialized, has always been racialized, and has been used against the African American community, and how this has challenged the ideals that this country is supposed to be about. How do you see it? Similarities, differences, the challenges ahead.
Could I ask your permission to let Mansour go first with that?
Sure. Brother Mansour.
Well, I have a couple of points I'd like to bring up. The 60s was the time of turbulence, of challenging the institutions of America that had gone for decades unquestioned and unchallenged. We had, like I mentioned earlier, you had the hippies and you had the Black Power movement. You had the anti-Vietnam War moratoria. You had the various platforms where the radical white students and the Black Power students could get together. That was one incidence of the races working together, so to speak, the races, right? I remember the Black Panthers had a stronghold at Syracuse University. I was one of the ones that was able to promote some of the literature and the album of Eldridge Cleaver called Dig, just 3 letters, D-I-G, Dig, where Eldridge Cleaver gave a huge synopsis of the 200 years of previous American history and said where we were supposed to go from there. I sold more of those albums than any of the members of the Black Panther Party. It was like with Forrest Gump when he was in that movie and he said, "I'm sorry, I messed up the Black Panther Party." And so now, and then you have people like H. Rap Brown, known as Imam Jamil Al-Amin, who was right here in Atlanta, Georgia, and cleaned up this city and put Atlanta on the map in the Muslim community. And for the last 20 years has been wrongfully incarcerated because he, other than Stokely Carmichael and Maulana Rod Karenga and a few of the others we could all name, he's the only one that's still kicking, that bridges the gap between the 60s and today's Islamic movement.
That's right.
And so that's one of the reasons why the government has always, had a bad taste in their mouth about him, because he really is a man of liberation. And so he's my friend here in Atlanta, Georgia. Unfortunately, he's been in jail wrongfully for a crime he didn't commit, and hopefully it's going to come up. There are things that I'd like to bring up, however, when I see the Black Lives Matter demonstrations in different cities, and they don't always have to be in the Black inner cities of the major cities of America. I'm so inspired when I see these Black Lives Matters demonstrations, and it's all white people carrying signs. So if I was a Black man in this society, I'd have a little dilemma in my mind when I see these white people now on the street. When I see the average white American, it's different than the average white American 50, 60 years ago. In other words, is that guy an ally with me, or is he out to get me? Yeah, how can you tell? So now the Black Lives Matter movement has begotten a movement among white Americans that say that we're about justice. We're not going to stand for this anymore. We've seen so many. We can name the names: Philando Castile, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin. We can name 6 or 8 or 10 of them right now in a row, where the law applies to Black people different than white people. But when that cop in Minneapolis stuck his knee on George Floyd's neck and snuffed the life out of him, I don't care, Black, white, disabled, blind, whatever, people said, we're not going to take it anymore. So while I say that black people don't need validation from anyone outside their ranks, don't get me wrong, but when the white people in this country decide they've had enough, you see, we used to have an expression about how the law applies to blacks different than whites. I used to say kind of jokingly, you know, I like to use humor a lot in my political observations, that, you know, you can do what you want in this society, but if you jack up a few white people long enough, you're going to jail, okay? Whereas you can do the same thing against black people, and it's like you get a slap on the wrist at best. And so now that most white people have been awakened, they call them woke now, you know, and I'm part of this. I'm part of the sports world too. I'm very involved in sports because even though I used to be an athlete, I know that sports in general makes a good moral person out of you, teaches a young man how to win, how to lose, how to be gracious, how to have some kind of dignity. But also the sports world has brought the races together in this country like no other institution has been able to do. And so when I see now the white players saying that we're going to take a knee with the black players, and I see the commissioners of the leagues, NBA, MLB, NFL, the commissioners and the coaches are saying, whatever my black players want to say, it's their right to say it, and I'm going to be with them all the way. So I'm saying this is a brand new day. I'm very inspired. I'm full of optimism. The only way this thing can go south is if the Agent Orange wins again in November and they get the law and order baloney of Nixon and these right-wing fascist pigs to take over this country again and slam the people like the cops slammed the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago with their billy clubs and put blood all over the street. I think the war is on, and I think the war is going to be won by the real Americans, the ones who believe in the ultimate unity of all humanity. And I, as a Muslim, and I don't care what religion you follow, if your religion doesn't put you in the position where you can see the ultimate unity of mankind, you got the wrong religion.
Alhamdulillah. My sister, Kathy.
That's I've been thinking, well, listening, of course, when Mansour was talking and thinking about things, and you asked a lot of questions, and I don't know which one I should concentrate on, but a lot of things have happened since the 60s. Yes, indeed. And a lot of societal changes have taken place. Human nature, I think, basically remains the same. And I think that it really is an issue of human nature and how a human being decides how they will live out their lives on earth. And we have two ways to go. We can either be part of the problem or we can be part of the solution. And I think that it is just a natural course of things that young people, with their energy and their dedication and their commitment and just the courage, the innate courage that a lot of them have, that they seem to lead the way, and they seem to be part of the vanguard in a lot of the movements that have taken place over the last couple of decades. I think that if I were to address Muslims about having hope, that our deen is a deen of hope, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like for us in any way to lose hope, and that we should not be cynical. We should always be very positive, because we have a whole history to look back on. The Qur'an is basically the history of humanity, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's book is just full of all kinds of lessons for us to learn, that there will always be hardships, there will always be tests, there will always be trials, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in place everything that we need to triumph as human beings. So I think that we should always have hope, and our hope is centered in our belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in the acceptance of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and of all the righteous throughout the ages, and how Allah equipped them to deal with any trials and tribulations that He sent their way. So I think there absolutely is that absolutely we should have hope. We should have hope, and that we should also understand that, you know, when you read from the letter from El-Hajj al-Shabazz, when he talked about the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the oneness of humanity, that's one thought that we should always have in the forefront of our minds, that humans change, and Allah is the one that changes the hearts of people. And we saw in the history, the unfolding history of our prophet, how one point in time, people that were his enemies, who plotted to kill him, became those that were most beloved of him. So I think that for any human being, with maybe a few exceptions, that there's always hope that that human being will dig deep down inside and discover their humanity, and in discovering their humanity, they will be able to extend that to their brothers in the human family, and that inshallah we will work together. Now we have this pandemic, and that was something that we didn't experience that before. Other parts of the world have experienced it. And actually, we think that my mother's father actually died from the pandemic, that Spanish flu in 1918. That's probably what he died from. So United States has known pandemic before. All right. But that was a long time ago. That was back from 1918 to 1920. All right. So, and we've seen it happen in other parts of the world. And as Americans, we think in our isolation from everybody else that it won't happen to us. Matter of fact, that we were told at the very beginning that there was a very, very, very small chance that actually we would experience this pandemic. And now we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had other plans for us. But I'm saying, even with this, and even with all the loss of life, and even with the total change in our lives forever at this point, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to have hope. And Allah wants us to come together as human beings, because they keep saying that we're in this together. We're in this together. Well, yeah, we are in this together. And the more of us had realized that, and that we understand that we are our brother's keepers, and that we want for our brothers what we want for ourselves, that it is our responsibility to care for ourselves, our families, and all of us around us, all of those around us, so that inshallah, Allah will give us relief from this situation. So I'm a person of hope, Brother Mauri. No matter how bad things look, and no matter how bad things get, we have to understand that Allah and Allah alone is in charge and in control.
Absolutely.
And He has written this for us. And we just have to find out what it is that He wants us to do in all of this, and do it, and be thankful and grateful to Him for everything.
Yeah, we're reminded of that verse in the Qur'an: no calamity occurs except by the permission of Allah.
Right.
And, I had a conversation just a few weeks ago with Sheikh Abdullah Hakim Quick. And I don't know if any of you saw it, but he and those working with him, they put out this thought-provoking short video commentary on the pandemic, very thought-provoking. And we talked, among other things, we also talked about the message in that video. And one of the things that he pointed out that I thought was it was very important to raise and to spend some time discussing in the conversation that he and I had, was that he saw this, and I agree with him, as an opportunity for a reset, and at the end of the day, it depends on what we do with it, what we do with this opportunity that we have been given through this punishing wake-up call. But with that said, Sister Zaynab, your thoughts? You unmute yourself. Yes.
Yes, and inshallah, and Brother Mauri, if you could just remind me of the question. Was the question how we can locate hope during this time?
Yes, yes. I mean, during this very challenging moment that we are in, both as a nation and as a global community, with both this pandemic that we're having to deal with, and also the unrest in our communities as a result of the demonstrations in response to a legitimate grievance. You know, do you have hope? Do you see hope in this? And this is an even more important question for you, because you are, I mean, part of your charge is to address and mentor young Muslims, and you know, to help guide them through this very challenging space that this country is in right now. So how do you see it, and what kind of advice do you give to the young charges under your influence?
Thank you so much, Brother Mauri. Alhamdulillah, I've just been learning and listening from my parents. Jazakumullah khair. It's been really fascinating, especially given that they have recollections coming back from 1968 and kind of drawing those parallels and making those contrasts. I would completely concur with my mother that as believers, obviously we cannot lose hope. You know, one of the things I often tell my students is that perhaps for those of us who've had experiences of worldly success, that when we encounter difficulties and lapses and failure, that we often don't really know how to deal with that. You know, that one of the things that's very interesting about this, about younger people today and the challenges they face, is that studies have shown that they're dealing with increasing levels of anxiety. And at younger and younger ages, that, you know, even some of the normal sort of, you know, just some of the normal experiences of childhood are often creating a great deal of anxiety in young people, so that by the time they reach adulthood, that their ability to be resilient has really kind of been worn down. So I think my message to younger people in our audience, right, is just to be aware of these additional challenges, to understand the connection between mental and spiritual well-being and an over-reliance on electronic devices and technology. And because I think there is, on the one hand, there is kind of that lure of social media where there's a lot of kind of organizing going on and activism, but then there's the other side of this, which is that, you know, sometimes we tend to kind of create echo chambers around us. And for young people, that challenge is to make sure that in their zeal to pursue issues of social and racial justice, that they don't find themselves trapped in those echo chambers. That it really is, like my dad mentioned, it really is important to make sure that we're able to get to convey this message across the different, you know, sort of the different measures of sort of worldly, you know, these different markers in terms of maybe not making the mistake of, we don't want to make the mistake of assuming just because this person's had a different set of life experiences or they're from a different background, they're not going to be able to understand at all where I'm coming from. That Islam actually gives us, I think, very real world practical tools to be able to convey to people that yes, all of us can have a stake in this conversation about equality, about the pursuit of racial and social justice and harmony. So as believers, you know, it's important that we not despair. And like I tell my students, just because Allah Ta'ala, just because God the Exalted has given people a certain level of success or comfort, it doesn't mean that we're going to face challenges. That being a person of faith, especially in the 21st century, that being a person of faith is often going to be an uphill battle. If we look at the example of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, he never stopped striving and sacrificing and struggling, right? There was never a period of quote unquote ease for him. I mean, there was always some ease within the difficulty, but there was never a time when the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, could kind of sit back and relax and be complacent. That's very important to understand the hadith. You know, that Allah Ta'ala, you know, made the affair of the believer wondrous, right? And the reason why the affair of the believer is always good is because, you know, it's basically the believer is confronted with two circumstances. Either the believer receives blessings, and for those blessings he or she is grateful and thanks Allah, or the believer believer is going to be tested and tried. And during those tests, the believer remains patient. And that response of patience, there's also reward for the believer in that. So yes, we should remain hopeful and positive and optimistic. I'm very gratified to see such a diverse group of people assembling on those streets, calling for change, right? I mean, my dad is correct. People are rightly fed up. And the thing that I think the piece of advice I would give to some of our transnational Muslims is don't make the mistake of dismissing all this as identity politics. Because we often tend to do that. Oh, Black Lives Matter or feminists, or they're just, a bunch of left-wing progressives. There are real grievances there. And we need to understand how we as a Muslim community need to be part of that conversation, we should not make the mistake of dismissing people's concerns. And we also have to make sure that we are equipping our community leaders to speak in a thoughtful way to these issues. But, alhamdulillah, I mean, I do remain optimistic. But for Muslims who are kind of out there in the trenches who want to be involved in activism, understand that we have certain principles that must underlie, the way that we go out and the way that we become involved in these struggles.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much, sister, for making that point. That's a very important point, and I think it's even more important to be coming from someone of your generation.
Really?
Because it's a very important point. Now,
yeah. Can I piggyback on one of her points?
Excuse me?
Can I piggyback on one of her points? Just take 1 minute.
Well, you know something? We are actually at the end of the program. We just have a few minutes left. So what you can do is you can use your opportunity for closing thoughts to piggyback or to say anything else that you feel that you need to say. So you're first, and then we'll go to Sister Kafi Niambi, and then we'll close out with our Sister Zaynab, inshallah. Final thoughts.
Yes, final thought at the tail end of what our daughter Zaynab just said regarding the Muslim community and our contribution. The last few days on Facebook, Dr. Ihsan Bagbi, a very special Muslim thinker, he's at the University of Kentucky, specialist in ethnicity and demographics. He came up with the idea, for decades he's been working on the idea of the suburban mosques adopting and taking under their wing the inner city mosques, meaning to say that the suburban mosques are much more resourceful money-wise and Islamic history-wise, and then the new Muslims, the mostly African-American mosques in the inner cities that, let's face it, sometimes they have a hard time keeping the lights on, even though they're very strong and independent people. So he brought up the idea of the suburban mosques adopting the inner city mosque to bring about that brotherhood of Medina that the Prophet, peace be upon him, brought about. And of course, you're going to get your people who don't do anything and haven't done anything and will never do anything. They're going to pick it apart and say, no, man, the Muhajirin from Mecca, they were accommodated by the Medinites. But now here we want the Muhajirin to be, we want the, we want to reverse and flip the script. And so we have to address that problem in our community to bring the ummah together to be an example to the rest of the country, how the Muslims have the solutions, and that Islam has a lot to say for the hope and future of this country.
Absolutely. Thank you, my brother. Sister Kafi Niambi, your final thoughts.
I just a couple things I want to say. I just really do believe that in our quest for justice and equity, that we ourselves be just and equitable. Because there is a tendency in these kind of movements and these kind of moments for people to go to extreme. Yes. And I think we need to be very, very thoughtful and careful about that it should always be a very balanced approach. And when we are demanding justice, that we also, from others, we are demanding justice from ourselves. And this is, what we are seeing being manifest in this country has been here for at least 400 years. Right? It's not going to be resolved overnight. But I do believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us an opening for this country to begin the process of healing.
Subhanallah.
and we need to keep that in sight. You know, it's one thing to pull down, you know, statues of Robert E. Lee, right? I mean, you know, and to hold a sign, and you know, to you know, give that verbal, verbal support. But is another thing to go deep down in our hearts and to root out those you know, those idols in our hearts.
Yeah.
And as like I said, if we want society to change, societal change comes with each and every one of us changing, and that is the sunnah of our beloved prophet.
Yes. Indeed it is. Thank you very much, my sister. And final thoughts from Sister Zaynab Ansari.
Thank you. So, Al-Hajj Mauri, I would like you to actually offer the final thoughts, because, I mean, mashallah, you have a distinguished career of actual grassroots organizing. I'm in a little bit of an ivory tower over here, and mashallah, I've been following your career. And I have to say that you had the courage to speak to a lot of issues, including that of Sister Aafia Siddiqui, that a lot of other people were just not ready to tackle. So I'm very grateful to you for shining a light on those issues. And I think the only thing I would say by way of reminder is this beautiful ayah in the Qur'an, O you who believe, كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط, right? So, O you who believe, stand upright, right, in the way of Allah Ta'ala as witnesses to qist, to justice, and do not let the dislike of a people or the hatred of a people allow you to swerve in the direction of injustice. Be just, that is closest to taqwa, and have reverence of Allah Ta'ala. Verily, Allah is all well aware of that which you do. And that is chapter 5, verse 8.
Alhamdulillah. Well, I want to thank the Ansari family for joining us today in this conversation. It has been very rewarding for me on so many levels. This is the first time we've had a family together for this kind of discourse. Hopefully it will not be the last, but you know, I'm glad that the first time it was with you. Again, I go back in my final thoughts to the point made by my dear brother Sheikh Abdullah Hakim Quick, that we in this country, we have an opportunity for a reset. You know, I'm reminded of that verse in the Quran that reads in translation, corruption has appeared on the land and on the sea on account of what humanity's hands have wrought. Allah will make them taste a part of what they have done so that they might return. This is a punishing wake-up call on two levels. On this country that, you know, prides itself with being the quote-unquote leader of the free world. And this you know, and this is especially significant for those of our brethren who take the position that I don't believe in anything I can't see. Well, we can't see this germ that is that has this country of ours, you know, in a catastrophic situation on so many levels. But it's a wake-up call, and it's an opportunity for a reset. I'm hoping and praying that those who are people of sincere faith, not just Muslims, but people of sincere faith across the board, who believe that there is, you know, there is a God and that there is a day of accountability, that we will now use the faith that we supposedly have to do what we're capable of doing to help put wherever we are on a right course. Take advantage of this moment, because, you know, this may be the last opportunity we get, you know, to utilize the gifts, the insights, you know, the many blessings that the Creator has given us, especially in this part of the world, to do the right thing. So, you know, we're praying to Allah Ta'ala that these discourses that we're having with folk that we value, like yourselves, that they will resonate in the hearts and minds of those who hear this discourse, and that it will awaken within us this this responsibility that we all have to be a part of the solution as opposed to being part of the problem. And there are no fence sitters. There is no neutral ground. There's no neutral space. As Frantz Fanon so eloquently stated in his book Wretched of the Earth, each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. It's on us now. It's on us in our lifetimes now. So we ask Allah Ta'ala to guide us, to give us the wherewithal that we need to accept these challenges. And we close with that short verse, that short surah, I should say, from the Qur'an, Surah Al-Asr. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, wal Asr. Innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawassaw bil haqq wa tawassaw bis sabr. Which means, in the name of Allah, in the name of the Almighty Creator, verily humanity is in loss, except those who believe and do good and exhort one another to patience, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere in the pursuit and upholding of that truth. So, that note, we thank you, Ansari family, Sister Zaynab, Brother Mansour, Sister Kafi Niambi.
It's been a real pleasure.
I love that story of how it all began. And inshallah, we're going to remember it. And
about 52 years ago.
52 years ago. And on a Wednesday. He remembered the day. It was a Wednesday. MashaAllah.
October 28th, 1968.
Brother
Alhamdulillah.
Jazakallah khairan. Jazakallah khairan.
May Allah bless you all.
It was an honor to be here.
All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Alhamdulillah.